President Joe Biden is stirring up a storm in the EV world, turning heads left and right. Biden is pushing hard for EVs, telling manufacturers to keep those wheels turning and production lines moving because for the Biden administration, EVs are the way to go. And here's the big but. It's happening amidst some shaky ground in the EV market. It seems not everyone's buying what he's selling. Believe it or not, some of the big players in the car game are feeling the pinch. Ford, they're looking at a $36,000 loss on each EV they sell. GM, they're not seeing green on their cars either. And Tesla, the king of the EV hill, has been nudged into cutting prices. It's pretty clear the production of EVs is hitting a bit of a speed bump. And now Joe Biden has also warned to shut down EVs immediately. So why the cold feet all of a sudden? What's with the U-turn from EVs? Let's take a look. You see, President Biden has been championing the big switch to electric, but more than 4,000 car dealers across the US are essentially waving a big hold-up sign at this whole plan. And you're probably wondering, why the sudden pump on the brakes? They're all saying the demand for EVs isn't quite what everyone thought it would be. These dealers aren't just any old car sellers. They represent every major car brand under the sun and are part of a large coalition that's more than a little concerned about how EVs are doing sales-wise. Despite the initial buzz and excitement around going electric, the turnout has been, well, less electric than expected. The Biden administration had this ambitious goal to turn 50% of car purchases electric by 2030. But here's the thing. Currently, electric cars only make up about 4% of sales. That's a pretty big gap to bridge. And here's where it gets even stickier. These dealers are saying EVs are just not flying off the lots, even with price cuts and incentives galore. Now, that's not just a bump in the road. It's more like a roadblock. It looks like there might be a bit of a backtrack happening with the administration's plans. The Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, is rumored to be tweaking its rules a bit, giving car makers a bit more breathing room. The new proposal suggests a less aggressive approach to phasing out gas-powered cars, meaning manufacturers won't have to go full throttle on electric just yet. This change is a nod to both the car industry and labor unions, giving them more time to amp up EV production and sort out the charging infrastructure without too much pressure. Despite the growth in the EV market, it hasn't exploded in popularity as some hoped. Last year, EVs only made up 7% of car sales, with more people opting for hybrids instead. This is a far cry from the administration's vision of EVs dominating 2/3 of sales by 2032. And overall for EVs, things are heating up, and not just because of global warming. It seems like GM and Ford are hitting some serious speed bumps on the road to an electric future. Now, think about it. If EVs are the future, why aren't they zipping off the lots into happy homes? Car dealers have been pretty vocal about a couple of major roadblocks. First up, the charging situation. If you're getting an EV, you'll need to charge it, but finding a spot can be like trying to find a needle in a haystack. It's a real pain. And then there's the energy grid, which seems like it's barely holding up as it is, let alone ready for a whole nation of EVs. And the price tag? Yikes. Forking over 60 to 70 grand for a car that gets you 250 miles before needing a juice up isn't exactly everyone's cup of tea. Plus, there's this whole drama about the batteries, where they come from and the minerals they need. A huge chunk of these come from China, which is a bit of a sticky situation since they're also the heavyweight champions of the global EV battery market. Relying too heavily on one country for all these critical components, especially one we've got a bit of a complicated relationship with, is making folks nervous. So, what are the car dealers saying? They're pretty much waving a giant flag at President Biden, suggesting we pump the brakes on this whole EV push. They're calling for more time to let battery tech get better, for EVs to become more wallet-friendly, and for the US to get a grip on its own mineral sources. They're hoping for a future where people choose EVs because they want to, not because they're being nudged that way by rules and regulations. Let's crunch some numbers for a sec. Gas-powered cars still ruled the roost in 2022, making up a whopping 93% of new car sales. When it comes to cost, EVs are still on the pricier side and don't go as far on a charge compared to other options. That's why even the big dogs like Ford and GM are tapping the brakes on their EV dreams. Ford's dialing back its battery factory plans in Michigan, cutting down on their lithium iron phosphate battery output by over 40%. They're still in the game, but not betting as big as before. And GM, they've scrapped their goal of cranking out 400,000 EVs in a set time frame, hinting that they're trying to match the slower than expected growth in EV demand. Models like the F-150 Lightning EV and Chevy Silverado EV are hitting pause. It's like everyone was racing full speed ahead towards electrification, but now they're taking a step back to really think things through. So it's becoming crystal clear that striking a balance is key. EVs could very well light the path to the future, but it's looking like there's a need for a more grounded approach. This approach should weigh consumer demand, technological capabilities, and the big picture, economic impacts. Dealers are pretty much sending smoke signals to President Biden, urging a slowdown. They're all for progress, but not at the speed that seems more about making a splash or padding pockets than genuinely easing folks into this electric dream. Despite the pushback, it seems the Biden administration is locked on fast forward when it comes to EVs. They're not just dipping toes, they're diving headfirst, splashing around billions of dollars, including a large sum to Ford, aiming to supercharge the EV shift. But let's peel back another layer of this onion. President Biden's been on a bit of a mission to electrify America's roads, rolling out initiatives left and right to bump up EV adoption, amp up infrastructure, and kick domestic manufacturing into high gear. Yet, some folks are squinting at these efforts, wondering if it's more about the race to lead in the EV market or really making these cars more wallet-friendly for the average Joe and Jane. In the midst of all these grand plans and initiatives, the everyday buyer's concerns, like the hit to their bank account and the practicalities of EV life, seem to be idling in the background. It's a complex puzzle, with pieces like consumer affordability, the readiness of technology, and the need for a robust infrastructure all needing to fit together just right. President Biden poured nearly $9 billion into Ford's lap to supercharge their EV production, and he's putting up barriers to keep foreign EVs from snagging those juicy incentives. It's like he's saying no thanks to cheaper overseas cars, betting big that Americans will happily pay a premium for homegrown electric rides, even if it means shelling out an extra $20,000. While these moves are laying down tracks for an EV-dominated future, it's becoming clear that not everyone's ready to jump aboard the electric express. Big names in the auto world like GM and Ford are feeling the pressure. After investing billions in electrification, they're pumping the brakes. GM's rethinking its electric truck expansion, and Ford's putting a halt on a massive EV plant project in Michigan. So, what's happening with all these EVs gathering dust in dealer lots? Dealers are slashing prices and rolling out attractive lease deals, trying to woo buyers. But even with discounts, these electric beauties are still hitting wallets hard. Did you know that EVs are now among the slowest sellers at dealerships? It's a tough scene, especially when a new electric Ford F-150 might cost you about $50,000, while its gas-powered sibling is under $37,000. Even with tax credits, that's a steep gap. On the flip side, Biden's all in on electrification, setting lofty EV sales goals and backing significant investments in charging stations. But this ambitious drive has some union workers sweating about their futures. As the industry shifts gears toward electric, there's anxiety about job security and whether workers will be left in the dust. This major push toward EVs is at a critical crossroads. If car manufacturers overlook consumer hesitations and just follow the political compass, we might be looking at a future where a legacy car maker could face a dead end. So, what do you think? Are EVs the only way forward, or should hybrids get a second look? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and while you're at it, don't forget to hit that like button. Cheers.